The laughingstock of the galaxy. The UNS Vanguard drifted in space, a rusted shadow of the past. Once, it had been a proud battleship, a guardian of Earth's colonies, but time had not been kind. Its hull was scarred with old battles, its weapon systems were outdated, and its engines barely functioned. To the rest of the galaxy, it was nothing more than a joke, a ship that should have been scrapped decades ago. The Galactic Council's mockery. The Galactic Council, a powerful assembly of the universe's strongest empires, had long dismissed humanity as insignificant. They saw Earth as a minor power, a species too young and weak to matter. And the Vanguard. It became a symbol of human weakness. The Tyrathian warlords mocked it, calling it a floating coffin. The Sellenary Empire, masters of advanced technology, laughed at its primitive weapons. The Draskan Dominion, a ruthless empire of conquerors, declared, if this is humanity's best, they will not survive the next war. To them, the Vanguard was proof that Earth was not a threat. The war that changed everything. For years, humanity endured the insults and humiliation. Then the Tyrathian warlords declared war. They launched a surprise attack on human colonies, believing Earth would surrender quickly. The Galactic Council didn't intervene. Why would they? Humanity was too weak to fight back. And when the UNS Vanguard was sent to face the enemy fleet, the laughter only grew louder. A lone, outdated battleship against the strongest warlords in the galaxy. It was suicide. The last chance for Earth. Admiral Jonas Reeves stood on the bridge of the Vanguard, staring at the massive Tyrathian fleet on the holoscreen. They were faster. They were stronger. They had weapons powerful enough to destroy planets. His crew knew the odds. Sir, they outnumber us 50-1, his weapons officer whispered. Then we'll make every shot count, Reeves replied. There was no retreat. The Vanguard was Earth's last hope. The enemy's arrogance. On the Tyrathian flagship, Supreme Warlord Kradax leaned back in his command chair, smirking. He watched the Vanguard approach, barely limping forward, its engines flickering like a dying flame. They send this rust bucket to fight us, he scoffed. End this quickly. His officers laughed. Across the Tyrathian fleet, weapons locked onto the Vanguard, preparing for a single, devastating strike. The battle was over before it began. At least, that's what they thought. The first move. And the first shock. Then, something strange happened. As the Tyrathian fleet opened fire, their shots missed. Not just once. Not twice. All of them. Impossible. Kradax snarled. His gunners recalibrated their targeting systems, but the Vanguard was moving faster than it should have been. A ship that should have been slow and clumsy was now dodging their fire with terrifying precision. And then, the Vanguard fired back. A shot that shook the stars. A single cannon blast erupted from the Vanguard's hull. The Tyrathians expected nothing. They expected the shot to be weak, inaccurate, useless. Instead, boom, a Tyrathian battlecruiser exploded instantly. The warlords watched in horror as their ship was torn apart in seconds. The laughter stopped. Kradax's eyes widened. What kind of weapon was that? No one had an answer. The Vanguard, the ship they had mocked, had just destroyed a warship in one shot. And the battle had only just begun. The war no one expected. The battlefield was silent. The Tyrathian fleet, once arrogant and certain of victory, now stood frozen in disbelief. A single shot from the UNS Vanguard had obliterated one of their largest warships in an instant. This was not possible. This was not how the battle was supposed to go. The warlords had laughed at this ship, called it a rust bucket, a relic. But now, their fleet was staring at something they did not understand. Something that was not supposed to exist. The enemy's panic. Inside the Tyrathian flagship, Supreme Warlord Kradax felt a rare sensation. Fear. His officers scrambled for answers. That ship shouldn't have firepower like that. Our scanners can't read its energy output. It wasn't moving like this in previous reports. Kradax slammed his fist on the control panel. Find out what's happening. Now. But there was no answer. Their scanners were useless. Their targeting systems had failed. And the U.S. Vanguard was still moving. Earth's last hope advances. On the bridge of the Vanguard, Admiral Jonas Reeves stood calm, his eyes locked onto the enemy fleet. He could see the fear creeping into their formations. For years, humanity had been seen as weak. Now, they were proving otherwise. His communications officer turned. "Admiral, enemy fleet is hesitating. Orders." Reeves smiled. "We show them what happens when you underestimate humanity. All weapons, fire at will." The Vanguard's revenge. The Vanguard unleashed its full arsenal. Particle cannons cut through enemy ships like paper. Hypersonic railguns shattered Tyrethian warships in a single volley. Jamming signals spread across the enemy fleet, shutting down communications. The strongest fleet in the galaxy was being ripped apart by a ship they had mocked. Kradax watched as one ship after another was annihilated. His fleet was outgunned. His fleet was outmatched. His fleet was losing. The galaxy watches in shock. The battle was being broadcasted live. Across the galaxy, millions watched in stunned silence. The Galactic Council, which had dismissed Earth, now scrambled for answers. The excellenary scientists who had mocked the Vanguard now analyzed every frame of the battle, desperate to understand. The Draskan warlords, once confident of humanity's weakness, now reconsidered their invasion plans. Earth was not weak. And the Vanguard was not a joke. It was a nightmare. The desperate counterattack. Kradax knew if he didn't act now, his entire fleet would be erased. All ships, commencez enterate fire on the Vanguard. Full power. Every remaining Tyrethian warship unleashed their firepower at the lone human vessel. Missiles, plasma cannons, fusion torpedoes, everything they had. The space around the Vanguard erupted in fire and chaos. For a brief moment, the enemy thought they had won. Then, the flames cleared, and the Vanguard was still there. The unbreakable ship. The ship that should have been destroyed in seconds was still moving, its hull barely scratched. Its adaptive shielding had absorbed the entire attack. The warlords watched in horror. Kradax took a step back from the command screen. This is impossible. And then, the Vanguard fired again. Boom. Another Tyrethian warship exploded instantly. The battle was no longer a fight. It was a slaughter. The beginning of fear. Kradax could feel it now. Something far worse than defeat. Something the galaxy had never felt toward humanity before. Fear. He clenched his fists, his voice shaking. We underestimated them. And now it was too late. The first strike. A trap is sprung. The battlefield was chaos. What should have been an easy victory had turned into a nightmare. The Tyrethian fleet, once so sure of their power, was now falling apart. And the UNS Vanguard, a ship they had mocked, was at the center of it all. The reality sets in. Inside the Tyrethian flagship, Supreme Warlord Kradax clenched his fists, watching his elite warships explode. Entire battlecruisers wiped out in a single shot. Fighter squadrons erased before they could fire. Missiles and torpedoes redirected back toward their own fleet. Kradax's officers scrambled, their voices filled with panic. Our weapons aren't locking onto the target. They've jammed our systems. They're inside our communications, reading our strategies before we execute them. Kradax snarled. How? This ship was supposed to be obsolete, but the Vanguard wasn't what it seemed. It had never been obsolete. It had been a trap. The secret of the Vanguard. The truth was simple. The Vanguard had been a joke to the galaxy, but to humanity. It was a masterpiece. Experimental AI systems made it unpredictable. Its weapons had been upgraded in secret, capable of piercing through the strongest defenses. Its stealth technology was so advanced, it couldn't be detected until it was too late. Humanity had let the galaxy laugh. They had allowed the enemy to underestimate them. Because they wanted this moment. Now, the trap had been sprung, and the Tyrathians had no escape. The execution begins. The Vanguard moved like a ghost through the wreckage of the enemy fleet. Railguns fired at impossible speeds, cutting through enemy hulls. Disruptor beams disabled warships instantly, leaving them helpless. Decoy drones created false signals, confusing the Tyrathians even further. The warlords had always believed that strength was all that mattered. Now strategy was tearing them apart. The warlord's fear. Kradax's hands shook. He had never lost a battle. Until now. He turned to his officers. "We have to retreat." The room fell silent. One of his commanders hesitated. "Warlord, the Tyrathians do not retreat." Kradax knew that. His empire had spent centuries conquering the weak. But now, for the first time, they were the weak ones. He had no choice. The impossible order. With rage in his voice, Kradax gave the order. "All surviving ships, fall back. Get out of here." The mighty Tyrathian fleet, once so proud, turned and ran. But the Vanguard was not done. It let them run. It watched them flee. And then it sent a single message to their retreating ships. A message that echoed through every Tyrathian comm system. The message that shook the galaxy. "Run. Tell them what you saw. Tell them what happens when you underestimate humanity." And then, the Vanguard disappeared from their radars, like a phantom, like a nightmare that would never leave them. The war was over, but the fear had just begun. The monster reveals itself. The Tyrathian fleet had fled. Their mighty warships, once the terror of the stars, had become nothing more than burning wreckage floating in the void. The UNS Vanguard, a ship that had been mocked, ridiculed, dismissed, now stood alone in the battlefield, undefeated. But the battle was not over, because the galaxy was watching. And now they wanted answers. The Galactic Council demands the truth. In the heart of the Galactic Council, representatives from 100 worlds gathered in chaos. The Draskan Dominion, brutal conquerors, wanted to know how the Tyrathians had lost so easily. The Selenary Empire, masters of technology, demanded to see what kind of weapons Earth had developed. The Vorthek Collective, an ancient race of strategists, studied every recording of the battle, searching for a flaw in humanity's tactics. For years, the Council had laughed at Earth. Now, they sat in uneasy silence, because they had just witnessed something impossible. A ship that should have been destroyed in seconds had instead become the deadliest warship in the galaxy. And no one knew how. The truth about the Vanguard. Deep in a classified military facility on Earth, Admiral Jonas Reeves stood before a private audience of Earth's highest officials. A large holographic projection of the Vanguard hovered in the air, its sleek, battle-worn hull reflecting the dim lights of the war room. The President of the United Earth Nations leaned forward. "Tell me, Admiral, how did a ship they called scrap metal wipe out an entire fleet?" Reeves smirked. "Because that was the plan all along. The ship that was never meant to win, until it did." The UNS Vanguard was not an accident. It had been a secret project for years, hidden in plain sight. On the outside, it was a relic, a joke, an obsolete warship left to rust. But beneath its ancient hull, it carried the most advanced weapon systems humanity had ever created. It had adaptive AI combat protocols, capable of predicting enemy maneuvers before they happened. Its stealth technology was beyond anything in the galaxy, making it invisible to enemy scanners. And its experimental energy disruptors could cripple an entire fleet's defenses in seconds. The Vanguard had been built for one purpose: to make the galaxy believe humanity was weak. And then, when the time was right, to prove them wrong. The warlord's last move. Far from Earth, in the ruins of the Tyrathian Empire, Supreme Warlord Kradax sat alone in his war chamber. His fleet was gone. His warriors were dead. His name had become a disgrace. But he was not finished. Kradax's claws curled into a fist. If he couldn't defeat humanity, then he would destroy them. With the last remnants of his forces, he activated the final weapon of the Tyrathian Empire, a planet killer bomb capable of wiping out an entire world. Its target, Earth. The war was supposed to be over. But now, humanity would face its greatest test, and only the Vanguard could stop it. The warlord's last stand. The war should have been over. The Tyrathian fleet was destroyed. The UNS Vanguard stood undefeated. The galaxy had changed forever. But Supreme Warlord Kradax refused to accept defeat. In the ruins of his shattered empire, surrounded by the last remnants of his once mighty fleet, Kradax activated his final plan. A plan that would make the universe remember his name. A plan that would make humanity suffer. The Doomsday Weapon. In the darkness of space, aboard a hidden Tyrathian base, an ancient weapon came to life. It was called the World Breaker, a planet killer bomb, 10 times more powerful than anything the galaxy had ever seen, capable of tearing Earth apart in seconds. Kradax's voice echoed through the chamber. If I cannot rule this galaxy, then neither will humanity. He entered the launch code. The countdown began. The race against time. On the UNS Vanguard, alarms blared. Admiral Jonas Reeves stared at the holographic display, his jaw tightening. They're launching something at Earth, his officer reported. Massive energy readings. It's a planet killer. A chill spread through the room. How long until impact? Reeves asked. The answer came like a hammer to the chest. 8 minutes. The war was not over. Now, it was a race against time. The impossible mission. The Vanguard had survived an entire fleet. But this was different. The World Breaker was too fast. Its defenses were too strong. Its payload would wipe out all life on Earth. And yet, Reeves knew there was only one option. We intercept it. A stunned silence filled the bridge. One officer hesitated. Sir, that thing is moving at near-light speeds. We'd have to match its velocity and destroy it before it reaches Earth. Reeves nodded. Then we do it. The Vanguard's engines roared to life. And the final battle began. The last line of defense. As the Vanguard sped toward the unstoppable bomb, Kradax watched from his hidden warship. He smirked. They are too late. No ship had ever stopped a world breaker. No species had ever survived its wrath. And yet, Kradax's smirk faded as he watched the Vanguard move. Faster than any human ship should be able to. More precise than any warship had ever flown. And then, it disappeared. The unthinkable maneuver. The Vanguard executed a hyperspace jump at close range, something that should have torn it apart. It reappeared directly in the path of the World Breaker. Reeves exhaled. There was only one shot at this. Fire all weapons. The Vanguard unleashed hell. Quantum missiles detonated along the World Breaker's outer shell. Kinetic railguns pounded its structure, forcing cracks to spread. EMP waves disrupted its internal systems. And then, the final shot. The Vanguard's primary cannon, a weapon designed in secret, never tested in combat, charged to maximum power. A single beam of white-hot energy cut through the World Breaker's core. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, boom! The World Breaker detonated in a blinding explosion, sending shockwaves across space. The Vanguard barely escaped the blast, its shield struggling to hold. But Earth was safe. The end of Kradax. From his warship, Kradax watched his final plan fail. His breath came in ragged gasps. His hands trembled. No, this isn't possible. He had been a conqueror, a ruler of empires. And now he was nothing. His last words echoed through the empty chamber. We should have never underestimated them. A final explosion rocked his warship, and Supreme Warlord Kradax was no more. The legend of the Vanguard. The Vanguard returned home, not as a relic, not as a joke, but as a legend. Across the galaxy, rulers and warlords whispered its name. The ship they had mocked had become the most feared warship in the stars. And on Earth, as the people cheered, Admiral Reeves stood on the bridge, watching the stars, because he knew this was only the beginning. The warship that broke the galaxy. The war was over. The Tyrathian Empire, once feared across the stars, was now nothing but a memory. The World Breaker, their ultimate weapon, their last hope, had been destroyed. And the ship they had mocked, the UNS Vanguard, had done the impossible. But something was wrong. Because while Earth celebrated, while the galaxy whispered in fear, something far worse was coming. Something no one was prepared for. The Galactic Council's panic. In the halls of the Galactic Council, an emergency meeting was held. Every empire, every faction, every ruler who had once laughed at humanity now sat in nervous silence. At the center of the room, a hologram of the UNS Vanguard hovered above them, its battle scars proof of its invincibility. The Draskan warlords, once eager to conquer Earth, now argued over whether to negotiate peace. The Selneri scientists, who had once called humans primitive, now studied every battle log, desperate to understand how this ship had won. Even the Vorthak Collective, masters of war strategy, had only one conclusion. We must never fight the humans. For the first time in history, the most powerful empires feared Earth. The fear spreads. Across the galaxy, the legend of the UNS Vanguard spread like wildfire. Some called it the Death Ship. Others whispered it was a myth, a ghost, a weapon beyond understanding. Many believed Earth had unlocked forbidden technology, something that could shift the balance of power forever. And deep within the unexplored regions of space, something else was watching. Something far older. Something that had never feared anything before. But now, even they hesitated. The return of the UNS Vanguard. Back on Earth, the Vanguard made its final approach home. The entire planet watched in silence as the ship that had been a laughingstock returned as a legend. Admiral Jonas Reeves stood on the bridge, watching the thousands of ships that escorted them back. He had known from the start. This ship was never meant to be a joke. It was meant to change history. As the ship landed, the crowds erupted in cheers. The world celebrated, knowing that humanity was no longer weak. The last warning. But Reeves wasn't celebrating. He stood in the war room, staring at a single transmission that had just come in. It was not from Earth. It was not from any known empire. It was from beyond the galactic borders. A message from an unknown force. A warning. It read, "You have revealed too much. The real war begins now." Reeves's hands clenched into fists. Because he knew. The Vanguard had not just won a war. It had woken something up. And soon, the galaxy would learn what true fear was. The legend of the UNS Vanguard. The war was over. The Tyrathian Empire had collapsed. The World Breaker was destroyed. The UNS Vanguard had become a nightmare whispered across the stars. But as Earth celebrated, the rest of the galaxy watched in silence. Because something had changed. And for the first time in history, the most powerful empires feared humanity. The day the galaxy stopped laughing. The Galactic Council, once so arrogant, now argued in panic. The Draskan warlords, once eager for war, now debated whether to form an alliance with Earth instead. The Selneri scientists, who had once dismissed human technology, began studying the Vanguard's every move. The Vorthak Collective, undefeated strategists, admitted they could not defeat Earth without risking extinction. And then a single vote was passed, one that had never been needed before. Earth was no longer a minor power. Earth was now a force to be reckoned with. The name that terrified the stars, from the outer colonies to the deepest reaches of space, the UNS Vanguard was given many names. The Ghost Warship, because no scanners could detect it before it attacked. The Titan Killer, because it had destroyed the strongest fleet in the galaxy, the ship of no survivors, because no enemy that had faced it lived to tell the tale. But to humanity, it was proof that they would never kneel. And to their enemies, it was a warning. The final transmission. As the Vanguard returned to Earth, a final message was sent from humanity to the galaxy. It was not a threat. It was not a declaration of war. It was a simple statement, a statement that sent shockwaves through the universe. Humanity does not start wars, but we will finish them. The shadow that watched. But even as the galaxy struggled to understand what had happened, something else was watching. Something older than the Council. Something that had never feared any empire before. And now, for the first time, even they hesitated. The legend begins. The U.S. Vanguard had been a joke. Now, it was a legend. A warship that had turned mockery into fear. A warship that had shaken the foundations of the galaxy. A warship that had changed everything. And across the stars, one message remained. A simple truth. A warning that would never be ignored again. Never underestimate humanity. End of story.